Standing in my empty office, I watched through the window as every machine on the factory floor ground to a halt simultaneously. The silence was deafening after 24 years of constant humming. My phone buzzed with the single-word confirmation I had sent 3 minutes ago: execute. 26-year-old Tyler Blackstone had destroyed my contract this morning, sneering that he didn't need my legacy knowledge. Now the lights flickered ominously across 3 production shifts. The aerospace components worth $500 million sat frozen mid-assembly. His phone would ring any second. The CEO would demand answers. But only I knew why the automated systems I had built from scratch were now completely irreversibly silent. Back in 1999, I was 24 years old with a fresh MIT mechanical engineering degree and calloused hands from working summers in my father's machine shop in Akron, Ohio. Meridian Manufacturing was just a mid-sized operation, then producing specialized aerospace components for Boeing and Lockheed Martin in a converted warehouse outside Detroit. The smell of cutting oil and hot metal felt like home to me. My first day supervisor, Thomas Brennan, showed me around the floor. He was a man who had worked his way up from apprentice welder to operations manager over 30 years. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision as he explained each process. "Most engineers come in here thinking they know everything," Thomas said, his gray eyes studying me carefully. "They design systems from ivory towers and wonder why reality doesn't match their blueprints. You different." I looked at the maze of machinery, the workers moving with choreographed efficiency, the delicate dance of precision manufacturing. "I want to learn how things really work before I try to change anything." That answer earned me a slight nod from Thomas and suspicious glances from my male colleagues. The engineering department was entirely men except for one secretary. They made their opinions clear during my first team meeting. "Hope you're not expecting any special treatment," said senior engineer Gary Willis, not bothering to look up from his blueprints. "This isn't some diversity experiment." I spent my first 6 months on the floor, learning every machine, understanding every process from the workers who operated them daily. Martha Rodriguez, the floor supervisor, became my greatest teacher. She was a 40-something woman who could diagnose equipment problems by sound alone. "Listen," Martha would say, holding up her hand as we stood near the CNC machines. "Hear that slight whistle in bearing number 3? That's 12 hours from failure. The computer diagnostics won't catch it for another 8. I filled notebooks with observations, sketches, measurements. While other engineers stayed in their offices designing theoretical improvements, I understood the heartbeat of the factory. Every vibration, every temperature fluctuation, every subtle change in the rhythm of production told a story. The breakthrough came during my second year. A critical order for military transport components faced a 3-week delay due to coordination problems between different production lines. Each line operated independently with its own control system, creating bottlenecks and inefficiencies. "What if we connected everything?" I asked Thomas during one of our evening discussions. One integrated system that could coordinate all the lines, optimize workflow, predict maintenance needs. Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That's been tried before. Always ends up more complicated than helpful." But I had been studying the patterns for months. I knew exactly how the pieces could fit together. Working nights and weekends, I designed a comprehensive automation system that would link every machine, every sensor, every control point into a single intelligent network. The system I created was revolutionary for its time. It used predictive algorithms to optimize production scheduling, coordinated maintenance windows to minimize downtime, and automatically adjusted parameters based on real-time conditions. More importantly, it learned from every operation, becoming smarter and more efficient with each passing day. However, I built in something that I never documented anywhere. Deep in the core programming, accessible only through a hidden protocol I called Project Safeguard, was a complete shutdown mechanism. If someone ever tried to sabotage the company, or if the systems fell into the wrong hands, I could stop everything with a single encrypted command. I told myself it was just responsible programming, a failsafe in case of emergencies. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew it was also insurance against the day someone might try to destroy what I had built. The system launched in 2001, and the results were immediate. Production efficiency increased by 37%. Defect rates dropped to nearly zero. Equipment downtime fell by 60%. Most importantly, we beat every delivery deadline by an average of 4 days. Thomas was promoted to plant manager, and he made sure I got the recognition I deserved. Helene Patterson, he announced at the company meeting, has just saved us approximately $8.2 million annually and positioned us to compete with manufacturers 3 times our size. The applause felt good, but what mattered more was watching Martha Rodriguez beam with pride. She had taught me to listen to the machines. Now those same machines were singing in perfect harmony. By 2005, my automation system had become the backbone of Meridian's operations. We had expanded to 2 additional facilities, and every major defense contractor wanted to work with us. The hidden failsafe remained my secret, buried so deep in the code that even I sometimes forgot it existed. But as I stood in that empty office 24 years later, watching $500 million of production grind to a halt, I remembered every line of that hidden code. Tyler Blackstone had just learned the most expensive lesson in corporate history about the value of legacy knowledge. From 2010 to 2020, Meridian Manufacturing transformed from a regional player into a powerhouse of American aerospace manufacturing. My automation innovations had not only revolutionized our production capabilities, but had prevented 3 potentially catastrophic disasters that could have bankrupted the company. The first near miss happened in 2012 when a software glitch in our quality control system almost allowed defective turbine components to ship to Boeing. My predictive maintenance algorithms caught microscopic stress fractures that would have failed at 30,000 feet. The potential lawsuits alone would have exceeded $50 million. Thomas Brennan, now CEO after the previous owner retired, called me into his office the day after the incident. His corner office overlooked the expanded factory floor, where nearly 400 employees worked in 3 shifts. "Helene," he said, settling into his chair with a cup of coffee, "I've been thinking about succession planning. When I retire in 10 years, I want you to take over as CEO." The offer was both thrilling and humbling. I had earned my place through merit and innovation, but I knew the challenges that lay ahead. The defense industry was evolving rapidly with new technologies and international competition reshaping the landscape. My personal life had also flourished during these years. In 2008, I married James Patterson, a software engineer who understood the demands of technical work. He was patient, supportive, and shared my passion for solving complex problems. When our daughter Emma was born in 2011, I worried about balancing motherhood with my career responsibilities. James proved to be an extraordinary partner. "Your work isn't just a job," he told me during one of those sleepless nights with a newborn. "You're building systems that keep people safe 30,000 feet above the ground. Emma will be proud of what her mother accomplished." The industry recognition came steadily. I spoke at engineering conferences, consulted for other manufacturers, and received the American Society of Manufacturing Engineers' highest honor in 2018. Multiple companies attempted to recruit me with offers exceeding my Meridian salary by 200% or more, but loyalty ran deeper than money. Meridian was where I had learned to listen to machines, where Martha Rodriguez had taught me that manufacturing was about people as much as processes. When Lockheed Martin's head of operations offered me a position that would have doubled my compensation, I declined without hesitation. "This is where I belong," I told Thomas. "We've built something special here, something worth protecting." Thomas smiled, the same expression he had worn when I first proved myself on the factory floor. "That's exactly why you'll make a great CEO someday." I focused on developing the next generation of engineers, creating mentorship programs, and inclusive policies that had been missing when I started. Young engineers, both men and women, found opportunities to grow and contribute in ways that previous generations had been denied. By 2023, Meridian employed over 600 people across 4 facilities. Our automation systems had been studied by manufacturing programs at MIT, Stanford, and Carnegie Mellon. The company that had started in a converted warehouse now held contracts worth over $2 billion. Then Thomas delivered news that changed everything. "Early onset Alzheimer's," he said quietly during our quarterly planning meeting in March 2023. "The doctors say I have maybe 2 good years left before the symptoms become significant." The diagnosis hit me like a physical blow. Thomas wasn't just my mentor and boss. He was the father figure who had believed in me when others saw only a young woman in a male-dominated industry. "We'll fight this," I said immediately. "There are treatments, clinical trials specialists who—" "Helene," Thomas interrupted gently, I need to step down while I can still make rational decisions. The board will have to approve my replacement, and there are external pressures I haven't told you about. Those external pressures materialized within weeks. Apex Industries, a Boston-based conglomerate known for acquiring mid-sized manufacturers and optimizing them through massive restructuring, made an aggressive takeover bid. The battle lasted 3 months. Thomas and the board fought valiantly to maintain independence, but Apex's financial resources proved overwhelming. They offered shareholders premiums that were impossible to refuse, promising to maintain employment levels and operational autonomy. I should have recognized the promises as lies. Apex's track record showed a pattern of acquisition asset stripping and workforce reduction. But I believed that our success and the critical nature of our defense contracts would protect us from the worst outcomes. On August 15, 2023, Apex Industries completed their acquisition of Meridian Manufacturing. The new management team arrived the following Monday, led by a 26-year-old Harvard MBA named Tyler Blackstone, who had never set foot in a factory before taking control of our lives. Standing in the parking lot that morning watching black SUVs pull up to the main entrance, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the late summer weather. Martha Rodriguez joined me, her expression reflecting the same unease. "Something's not right about this," she said quietly. I nodded, remembering the hidden failsafe buried deep in my automation systems. For the first time in 24 years, I wondered if I might someday need to use it. Tyler Blackstone announced his arrival with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball through a cathedral window. The first company-wide meeting took place on a Tuesday morning in the main production bay, with all 600 employees gathered around hastily arranged microphones and speakers. Blackstone stood on a raised platform, wearing an expensive charcoal suit that probably cost more than most of our machinists earned in a month. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his teeth were artificially white, and his smile never reached his calculating blue eyes. "Welcome to the future of manufacturing," he began, his voice amplified across the cavernous space. "I'm Tyler Blackstone, your new Chief Executive Officer, and I'm here to drag this company into the 21st century." I stood with the other senior staff near the front, trying to process the implications of his word choice. Drag. Not lead, not guide, not develop. Drag. For too long, Meridian has been trapped in legacy thinking. Blackstone continued, his gaze sweeping across the assembled workforce. Legacy processes, legacy systems, legacy management styles that prioritize the past over progress. Thomas Brennan stood beside me, his jaw clenched with barely contained anger. 24 years of careful relationship building, of treating employees as family rather than resources, was being dismissed as outdated thinking by someone who could have been our son. "Effective immediately, we're implementing total organizational restructuring," Blackstone announced. "Every position, every process, every procedure will be evaluated for contemporary relevance and optimization potential." The questions from the floor revealed the depth of employee anxiety. Linda Morgan, a quality inspector with 18 years of experience, asked about job security. Blackstone's response was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak. Job security comes from embracing change and demonstrating value alignment with forward-thinking operational paradigms, he said. "Those who adapt will thrive. Those who resist will find themselves incompatible with our new direction." After the meeting, I researched Blackstone's background extensively. Princeton undergraduate degree in economics, Harvard MBA, with concentration in corporate restructuring, 3 years at McKinsey Consulting, specializing in manufacturing optimization. 0 hands-on factory experience. 0 understanding of the complexities involved in aerospace component production. His previous assignments had been advisory roles, providing recommendations to executives who actually implemented changes. Meridian was his first operational leadership position, a fact that became increasingly obvious as he began dismantling everything we had built. The termination started within 2 weeks. Blackstone brought in a team of efficiency consultants who analyzed every job function using spreadsheet models that reduced human beings to cost-benefit calculations. Experience was viewed as liability rather than asset. Institutional knowledge was dismissed as resistance to innovation. Martha Rodriguez was among the first to go. 30 years of dedicated service, countless crises resolved through her expertise, millions of dollars saved through her ability to diagnose problems before they became disasters. None of it mattered to the consultant's algorithms. "I'm sorry, Martha," Jennifer Walsh, the new Human Resources Director, said during the termination meeting. "Your position has been identified as redundant with automated monitoring systems." Martha sat in stunned silence for several seconds before finding her voice. "Who's going to train the new people? Who's going to know when Machine 7 is running hot? Even though the sensors say it's fine, who's going to catch the problems before they happen?" Contemporary monitoring technology eliminates the need for intuitive assessment methods, Walsh replied, reading from a script. "Our new automated systems provide data-driven insights that surpass legacy diagnostic techniques." I attended Martha's farewell gathering at a bar near the plant that Friday evening. 43 employees showed up, representing every department and shift. The stories they shared painted a picture of a woman who had touched every life in that factory. "She taught me how to read bearing wear patterns," said junior technician Marcus Rodriguez, Martha's son, who had started working at Meridian the previous year. "Not just the textbook stuff, but the real signs that matter. How do you replace that with software?" I hugged Martha at the end of the evening, both of us fighting back tears. "This isn't over," I whispered. "Things will change." "I hope you're right," Martha replied. "But be careful, Helene. He's coming for you next." She was right. Within days of Martha's departure, Blackstone began questioning my authority and relevance. He scheduled meetings during times when I was unavailable, made decisions about my automation systems without consulting me, and consistently undermined my recommendations in front of other staff members. The attack on my systems came disguised as modernization. Blackstone announced that Meridian would be replacing our current automation infrastructure with cutting-edge artificial intelligence solutions provided by Advanced Manufacturing Analytics, a consulting firm that specialized in Industry 4.0 implementations. During the presentation, AMA's representatives promised revolutionary improvements, machine learning algorithms that would optimize production in real-time predictive maintenance, that would eliminate unexpected failures, and quality control systems that would achieve zero-defect manufacturing. "Their proposal represents the future," Blackstone declared during the board meeting. "While our current systems have served adequately, they're fundamentally limited by legacy architecture and outdated programming methodologies." I requested permission to present a counter-analysis documenting the risks and costs associated with complete system replacement. My presentation included detailed comparisons of performance metrics, implementation timelines, and potential disruption to critical defense contracts. "Data doesn't account for innovation. Disruption potential," Blackstone responded dismissively. "You're evaluating tomorrow's solutions using yesterday's metrics." The board members, most of whom had never worked in manufacturing, were impressed by AMA's polished presentation and Blackstone's confident promises. They voted to approve the system replacement, despite my warnings about implementation risks. Later, I discovered that Advanced Manufacturing Analytics was Tyler Blackstone's former consulting firm. The contract they had negotiated was priced at $47 million for implementation that would take 18 months and require complete production shutdown during transitions. When I attempted to present this conflict of interest to the board, Patricia Hawkins, the board chair cut me off before I could finish. "Tyler has been transparent about his consulting background," she said. "His familiarity with AMA's capabilities is an advantage, not a liability. Your concerns sound like resistance to necessary modernization." That night, I sat in my home office reviewing 24 years of work trying to understand how everything I had built was being systematically destroyed by someone who had never solved a real problem in his life. James found me there at 2 a.m, staring at printouts of system performance data. "You could leave," he said gently. "Any company would hire you tomorrow. You don't have to fight this battle." "Yes, I do," I replied. "Because if I don't, 600 people lose their jobs when his systems fail. And they will fail." I thought about the hidden failsafe buried in my automation code. For the first time since creating it, I began to consider whether the day might come when I would actually need to use it. Winter arrived early in Detroit that year, and the cold seemed to seep into every corner of Meridian manufacturing, along with Tyler Blackstone's systematic campaign to erase my influence. Snow fell steadily outside my office window as I watched him execute what I had come to recognize as a deliberate strategy to drive me out. The isolation began subtly. Blackstone restructured reporting hierarchies so that department heads who had worked with me for over a decade now reported directly to his newly hired operations manager, a 29-year-old consultant named Ashley Turner, who had never worked outside of PowerPoint presentations. "We're streamlining decision-making processes," Blackstone explained during a leadership meeting where my input was solicited on nothing, and my suggestions were politely ignored. Too many layers of legacy approval create bottlenecks that inhibit agile responsiveness. Translation: he wanted to make decisions about my systems without my involvement. The real blow came when I discovered that factory floor workers were still consulting me for technical decisions despite the new organizational chart. Marcus Rodriguez, Martha's son, who had somehow survived the layoffs, approached me during my lunch break. "Miss Patterson," he said quietly, glancing around to make sure we weren't overheard. "Machine 12 is making that sound again, the one your automation system flagged last month. Turner says the new diagnostic software shows everything's normal, but it sounds exactly like what Mom taught me to listen for." I knew the sound he meant, bearing wear in the spindle assembly that wouldn't show up on standard diagnostics for another 2 weeks. Left untreated, it would result in complete spindle failure during production, potentially destroying a $50,000 order of titanium components. "Schedule maintenance for this weekend," I told him. "Replace the bearing assembly and check the lubricant flow rates." Turner already said no. She says we follow computer diagnostics, only not legacy intuition methods. That afternoon, I tried approaching Turner directly. She was in her office, which had been decorated with motivational posters about innovation and disruption, reviewing reports on her laptop. "Ashley," I said, "Machine 12 needs preventive maintenance this weekend. I know the diagnostic software isn't showing problems yet, but the bearing wear patterns—" "Helene," Turner interrupted without looking up. "I appreciate your historical perspective, but we're implementing data-driven maintenance protocols. Subjective assessments introduce human error variables that modern systems eliminate. 24 years of experience isn't subjective assessment," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "It's pattern recognition based on thousands of hours of direct observation." "That's exactly the kind of legacy thinking that limits optimization potential," Turner said, finally making eye contact. "We're moving beyond individual intuition toward comprehensive analytical frameworks." I left her office knowing that Machine 12 would fail within 10 days, knowing that the failure would be blamed on inadequate monitoring rather than ignored expertise, and knowing that this was exactly what Blackstone wanted. The trap was being constructed with methodical precision. Every decision I made was questioned, every recommendation was second-guessed, and every success was attributed to automated systems rather than human insight. Meanwhile, Blackstone began documenting what he called my resistance to organizational evolution. The harassment escalated to personal cruelty. Important meetings were scheduled during Emma's school events that I had mentioned weeks in advance. Budget approvals that had been routine formalities for years now required extensive justification and multiple revisions. My office was relocated to the basement level ostensibly for space optimization, but clearly designed to signal my diminished status. "You're being pushed out," James observed one evening as I struggled to help Emma with her homework while reviewing contract specifications that Turner had rejected for insufficient detail. "I won't give him the satisfaction," I replied. "This company means too much to too many people." But Blackstone wasn't content with passive pressure. He wanted active justification for my termination, and he was willing to manufacture the evidence he needed. The opportunity came when I discovered financial irregularities in the Advanced Manufacturing Analytics contract. The implementation costs had increased from $47 million to $63 million, with no corresponding increase in deliverables. Change orders were being approved without proper documentation, and timeline extensions were being granted despite penalty clauses. More concerning was evidence of personal relationships between AMA executives and Blackstone that predated the Meridian acquisition. Dinner receipts, travel records, and consulting fees that suggested ongoing financial arrangements beyond the official contract. I spent 3 weeks building a comprehensive case documenting what appeared to be systematic fraud. The evidence showed kickback payments, inflated invoices, and deliberate contract manipulation designed to benefit Blackstone personally, while exposing Meridian to massive financial liability. The presentation to the board was scheduled for a Thursday morning in February. I had prepared meticulously, organizing evidence chronologically and cross-referencing financial records with performance metrics. This was my chance to expose Blackstone's corruption and protect the company I loved. But when I arrived at the boardroom, I discovered that Blackstone had poisoned the well before I could present my case. "Before we hear from Helene," Patricia Hawkins announced, Tyler has some concerns about recent behavior patterns that we need to address. Blackstone stood at the head of the table wearing his practiced expression of disappointed concern. I'm afraid we're dealing with a situation that's becoming increasingly problematic. Helene has been engaging in activities that appear designed to undermine authorized operational improvements. The accusations came in waves: unauthorized access to financial records, spreading negativity among floor workers, refusing to cooperate with new management structures, and demonstrating what he termed legacy attachment syndrome that prevents adaptive thinking. These behavior patterns, Blackstone continued, represent exactly the kind of resistance to progress that prevents organizational evolution. While I respect Helene's historical contributions, we have to prioritize the company's future over individual comfort with outdated methodologies. Board members who had known me for over a decade listened with expressions of growing concern. Robert Sterling, who had praised my innovations countless times, now nodded gravely as Blackstone painted me as a disruptive force threatening company stability. When I finally got to present my corruption evidence, the narrative had already been established. Every document I showed was dismissed as evidence of my obsessive resistance to change. Every financial irregularity was explained as necessary modernization costs that I was too limited in perspective to understand. I think we're seeing exactly what Tyler described, Patricia Hawkins said after my presentation concluded. This level of paranoid investigation into routine business decisions suggests someone who's lost the ability to function effectively in a contemporary management environment. The meeting ended with a formal warning about my conduct and a requirement that I undergo performance counseling with Jennifer Walsh. As I walked to my car through the February snow, I realized that Blackstone had won this round completely. That evening, he made his move to finish me entirely. "Helene," he said, calling my cell phone at 8:30 p.m. "I wanted to give you a personal heads up. We've been monitoring some concerning patterns in system access logs, and there are questions about whether your continued presence represents a security risk." "What are you talking about?" "Unauthorized access to classified production data, sharing sensitive information with terminated employees using company systems for personal research projects. I'm afraid we're going to need to restrict your access privileges pending a full investigation." The threat was clear. He was preparing to frame me for security violations, creating justification for immediate termination without severance or benefits. 24 years of dedication would end with accusations of corporate espionage. "Tyler," I said quietly, "you have no idea what you're dealing with." "Actually," he replied with audible satisfaction, "I think I understand the situation perfectly. Legacy thinking, legacy systems, legacy employees, it's all going to be cleaned up very soon." After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at my laptop screen. Deep in the automation code that controlled every aspect of Meridian's production capability was a failsafe that only I knew existed. Project Safeguard had been dormant for 24 years, waiting for the day when someone would threaten to destroy everything I had built. Tyler Blackstone was about to learn the most expensive lesson in corporate history about the true meaning of legacy knowledge. The manufactured crisis came on a Tuesday morning in March, engineered with the same calculated precision that Blackstone had used to dismantle every other aspect of my career. I arrived at work to find emergency vehicles in the parking lot and a crowd of workers gathered near the Sector 7 production line. Machine 12 had failed catastrophically during the night shift, exactly as I had predicted 2 months earlier. The spindle bearing that Marcus Rodriguez had identified through sound patterns had seized, completely destroying a $47,000 batch of titanium aerospace components and damaging the machine beyond economic repair. Ashley Turner stood near the wreckage talking to reporters from Manufacturing Today magazine, her voice carrying across the factory floor as she explained the situation to anyone who would listen. "This represents exactly why we're implementing comprehensive modernization," she said, gesturing toward the twisted metal and scattered components. "Legacy equipment operating under outdated maintenance protocols simply cannot meet contemporary reliability standards." The irony was breathtaking. The failure had occurred precisely because they had ignored my maintenance recommendations and refused to authorize preventive repairs. Now they were using the predictable disaster as evidence that legacy systems were unreliable. But Blackstone's trap was more sophisticated than simple blame shifting. While I was examining the damaged equipment and documenting the actual cause of failure, security cameras were recording my presence in areas that had been quietly reclassified as restricted access zones. Jennifer Walsh appeared at my shoulder as I was photographing bearing wear patterns that would have been obvious to anyone who understood machinery. "Helene," she said quietly, "I need to see you in my office immediately." The disciplinary hearing was a kangaroo court with predetermined outcomes. Walsh sat behind her desk, flanked by two recently hired associates who were clearly there to serve as witnesses rather than participants. A stack of printed documentation sat before her, thick enough to represent weeks of prepared justification. "We've documented a pattern of concerning behavior," Walsh began reading from prepared notes. "Unauthorized access to restricted areas, sharing proprietary information with former employees, using company resources for personal projects, and most seriously engaging in what appears to be deliberate sabotage of organizational improvement initiatives." The evidence was manufactured but professionally crafted. System access logs showed me entering areas during off hours, conveniently omitting that I had been responding to emergency calls from floor supervisors. Email records documented my communications with Martha Rodriguez, framing our discussions about equipment problems as sharing confidential information with terminated personnel. "Furthermore," Walsh continued, "your behavior during recent organizational changes demonstrates an inability to adapt to contemporary management methodologies. Multiple department heads have reported incidents of undermining behavior and active resistance to authorized improvements." Ashley Turner and Brandon Wells, another of Blackstone's recent hires, had been coached to provide testimony about my supposed disruptive activities. Their statements painted me as a bitter employee who couldn't accept change and was actively working to sabotage progress. "I've dedicated 24 years to this company," I said when given the opportunity to respond. "Every innovation, every improvement, every dollar saved has come from understanding how these systems actually work. You're destroying institutional knowledge that took decades to develop. That's exactly the kind of legacy attachment that prevents organizational evolution," Walsh replied. "We're moving beyond individual dependencies towards systematic operational frameworks." The trap reached its climax when Tyler Blackstone entered the room carrying a folder of documents and wearing an expression of disappointed authority. He sat down across from me and opened the folder deliberately, as if the contents were too important to handle carelessly. "Helene," he said, his voice carrying artificial regret, "I had hoped we could work through these issues collaboratively, but recent events have made it clear that your approach to change management is fundamentally incompatible with our organizational direction." He produced my employment contract, the same document that had been updated and renewed 7 times over the years as my responsibilities had increased and my contributions had been recognized. "Effective immediately," Blackstone continued. "We're terminating your employment for cause related to insubordination, security violations, and willful interference with authorized business operations." The contract destruction was pure theater. Blackstone held the document up so I could see it clearly, then methodically tore it into pieces while maintaining eye contact. Each rip was deliberate, calculated to maximize the psychological impact. "I don't need your legacy knowledge," he said, as the pieces fell onto the conference table. "This company needs forward-thinking leadership that prioritizes progress over nostalgia." Security escort from the building completed the humiliation ritual. Frank Morrison, a guard who had worked at Meridian for 12 years, apologized quietly as he accompanied me to my office to collect personal belongings. "This is wrong, Miss Patterson," he said as I packed 24 years of memories into a cardboard box. "Everyone knows this is wrong." "I know, Frank," I replied, trying to maintain composure while employees I had mentored watched from doorways and cubicles. "But sometimes wrong wins, at least temporarily." The walk through the factory floor was devastating. Workers who had trusted my judgment for decades watched silently as their advocate was escorted out like a criminal. Marcus Rodriguez stood near his workstation, with tears in his eyes, probably remembering his mother's termination and realizing that the institutional knowledge she had represented was being systematically eliminated. As we passed the main production control room, I noticed technicians installing equipment for the new AI monitoring system. Banks of servers and displays that would supposedly replace human expertise with algorithmic decision-making. The installation was clearly behind schedule, with cables running across walkways and temporary connections that violated basic safety protocols. "Stop," I said to Frank, pointing toward a configuration that made my blood run cold. "That cooling system isn't adequate for the server load. The thermal management calculations are completely wrong." Frank looked where I was pointing, seeing nothing but technical equipment that meant nothing to him. "I'm sorry, Miss Patterson, but I have to get you out of the building. Frank, when that system overheats, it's going to take down the primary control network. Every production line will stop simultaneously. You have to warn someone." "Miss Patterson, please don't make this harder than it has to be." I tried shouting warnings to the installation technicians, but they had been instructed not to engage with me. Ashley Turner appeared from the control room and waved Frank forward impatiently. "Security risk," she said loudly enough for nearby workers to hear, attempting to interfere with authorized systems upgrades. The final insult came as we reached the parking lot. Blackstone had arranged a company-wide announcement about my departure, framing it as liberation from legacy thinking, rather than the loss of irreplaceable expertise. "Today marks an important milestone in Meridian's evolution," his voice echoed from speakers throughout the facility. "We're moving beyond individual dependencies toward collaborative operational excellence. Tonight, we'll celebrate our progress with a reception for all employees who are committed to building our future together." I sat in my car for several minutes after Frank returned to the building, staring at the factory that had been my second home for over 2 decades. Through the windows, I could see the production lines running smoothly under the control of automation systems I had designed and refined through years of careful observation. But hidden deep in that code was Project Safeguard, waiting for activation like a sleeping guardian. Tyler Blackstone believed he had won completely, that legacy knowledge was powerless against contemporary management techniques. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The drive home took 43 minutes through early evening traffic, giving me time to process 24 years of memories, while Tyler Blackstone's words echoed in my mind. "I don't need your legacy knowledge." Every traffic light, every turn, every familiar landmark along the route felt different now, as if the landscape itself had changed along with my relationship to it. I pulled into my driveway at 6:15 p.m. and sat in the car staring at my house. Through the front window, I could see James helping Emma with homework at the kitchen table, both of them unaware that everything had just changed. The warm light from inside looked like safety and comfort, but I knew that safety was an illusion now. Emma ran to the door when I came inside, her 12-year-old energy filling the entryway as she launched into a detailed account of her day at school. But she stopped mid-sentence when she saw my expression. "Mom, what's wrong?" James appeared behind her, taking in my cardboard box, and the defeat that I couldn't hide. His engineer's mind quickly processed the evidence and reached the obvious conclusion. "They fired you," he said quietly. "Daddy," Emma said, looking between us with growing concern. "What does that mean?" The next hour was one of the most difficult of my life. Explaining to a 12-year-old that sometimes people in power make decisions that hurt good people, that fairness doesn't always prevail, that institutions you trust can betray you without warning. "But you're the smartest person I know," Emma said, curled against my side on the living room couch. "How can they not want you?" "Sometimes being smart isn't enough," I replied, stroking her hair. "Sometimes people are afraid of knowledge they don't understand." "That's stupid," Emma declared with the moral clarity that only children possess. "Yes," I agreed. "It is stupid, but stupid people sometimes have power and they use that power to hurt things they can't control." James waited until Emma was asleep before asking the question I had been dreading. "What are you going to do?" I had been considering that question during the entire drive home, weighing options and consequences while trying to separate emotion from logic. The rational choice was obvious: accept defeat, find another job, move on with my life, and let Tyler Blackstone destroy Meridian Manufacturing through his incompetence and arrogance. But rationality had limits when confronting injustice. 600 people depended on that factory for their livelihoods. Thousands of defense contractors relied on Meridian's components for aircraft that carried American soldiers and civilians. The automation systems I had spent decades perfecting were about to be replaced by untested technology implemented by consultants who had never solved a real problem. "I built something into the automation system years ago," I told James, "a failsafe that only I know about. If I activate it, every production line stops immediately." James studied my face in the lamplight, probably seeing emotions that I wasn't ready to acknowledge. "That sounds like corporate sabotage. That sounds like something that could land you in federal prison. It sounds like the only way to prevent a much bigger disaster." "Helene, think about what you're saying. You're talking about destroying your own life's work out of spite." "No," I said, standing and walking to the window that overlooked our quiet suburban street. "I'm talking about protecting my life's work from people who want to destroy it for profit." At 9:30 p.m., I made my decision. I kissed James and promised Emma that everything would be better in the morning, then drove back toward Meridian Manufacturing with my laptop and 24 years of suppressed anger. The factory operated 3 shifts, so the parking lot was half full with second-shift vehicles. I parked near the back fence away from security camera coverage and accessed Project Safeguard through a maintenance terminal that most people assumed was disconnected. The hidden protocol required biometric confirmation and a 64-character passphrase that I had memorized but never written down. As I entered the commands, my hands trembled with the magnitude of what I was about to do. Project Safeguard had been designed as protection against external threats, cyber attacks, industrial espionage, hostile takeovers by foreign entities. I had never imagined using it against internal enemies, against people who were supposed to be protecting the company rather than plundering it. The system gave me multiple confirmation prompts requiring deliberate choices at each stage. Emergency shutdown protocols would affect not just current production, but also climate control, material handling, quality assurance, and data systems. Recovery would require manual restart procedures that only I fully understood. At the final prompt, I hesitated for 37 seconds, thinking about the workers who would lose wages, the customers who would face delivery delays, the chaos that would ensue when $500 million worth of production stopped instantly. Then I thought about Martha Rodriguez, fired after 30 years of loyal service. Thomas Brennan, dismissed despite building the company from nothing. Marcus Rodriguez and hundreds of other employees who would lose their jobs when Blackstone's schemes inevitably failed. I typed the final command sequence and pressed enter. The shutdown began immediately. Across 3 buildings and 4 production lines, every automated system received simultaneous termination signals. CNC machines completed their current operations and stopped. Conveyor belts carried their final loads to completion and halted. Robotic assembly units finished their tasks and powered down. The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in over 20 years, Meridian Manufacturing was completely quiet. I sent a single text message to Martha Rodriguez: execute. She would understand the meaning and know that justice was finally being served. Then I drove home to wait for Tyler Blackstone's world to collapse around him. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. The caller ID showed Tyler Blackstone's direct number, probably calling from the factory where he was discovering that his new AI monitoring system was completely useless without the underlying automation infrastructure to monitor. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 12:15 a.m. from Jennifer Walsh, then Ashley Turner at 12:38. Then numbers I didn't recognize, probably board members or Apex Industries executives who were learning about the crisis through emergency notifications. I turned off the phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months, while Tyler Blackstone dealt with the most expensive lesson in corporate history about the value of legacy knowledge. By morning, the real consequences would begin to unfold. Defense contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars would face delay penalties. Stock prices would plummet. Investigators would demand explanations for production failures that violated national security commitments. And Tyler Blackstone would discover that firing the only person who understood how to restart the systems had been the most catastrophic mistake of his brief and disastrous career. The emergency board meeting was called for 7 a.m. on Wednesday, less than 8 hours after Meridian's production lines fell silent. I received the formal summons at 5:30 that morning through a registered courier, who apologized for the early delivery while handing me documents that could either restore my career or land me in federal prison. James made coffee while I reviewed the legal language that essentially begged me to attend an emergency session to discuss immediate solutions to critical operational challenges. The tone was desperate, a far cry from yesterday's dismissive arrogance. "You hold all the cards now," James observed, reading over my shoulder. "They can't restart production without you." "No," I replied, "but they can still destroy me if I don't handle this correctly." The drive to Meridian took place in pre-dawn darkness, with snowflakes drifting through my headlights and emergency vehicles still visible in the factory parking lot. News vans from 3 Detroit television stations had arrived during the night, drawn by reports of mysterious production failures at a major defense contractor. Inside the main conference room, I found a gathering that represented the complete power structure of both Meridian and Apex Industries. Patricia Hawkins sat at the head of the table, looking haggard and stressed. Robert Sterling reviewed documents with the intense focus of someone trying to understand a disaster that threatened his reputation. 3 executives from Apex Industries had flown in overnight from Boston, their expensive suits and grim expressions indicating the severity of the situation. Tyler Blackstone sat at the far end of the table, his perfectly styled appearance from yesterday replaced by rumpled clothing and the hollow stare of someone whose career was circling the drain. Ashley Turner and Jennifer Walsh flanked him like mourners at a funeral. "Helene," Patricia Hawkins began without preamble, "we need you to restart the production systems immediately. Before we discuss technical solutions," I replied, settling into my chair with deliberate calm, "I think we should address the circumstances that led to yesterday's termination." Marcus Webb, Apex Industries' chief operating officer, leaned forward with the predatory focus of someone accustomed to corporate warfare. "Ms. Patterson, we're facing potential penalties exceeding $200 million if defense contract deliveries are delayed beyond this week. Personal grievances are secondary to operational requirements." "Personal grievances," I repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air. "Is that what we're calling 24 years of dedicated service, terminated through manufactured accusations and character assassination?" The room fell silent except for the sound of snow against windows and the distant hum of backup generators maintaining minimal facility operations. Every face around the table reflected the same uncomfortable realization they needed something that only I could provide. "Tyler," Webb said, turning toward Blackstone with barely contained fury, "explain to me again how we ended up completely dependent on knowledge possessed by a terminated employee." Blackstone's response was a masterpiece of deflection and corporate buzzwords. He talked about legacy system dependencies, the challenges of technological transition, and the unexpected complexity of automation integration. He never once mentioned the corruption, the manufactured evidence, or the systematic destruction of institutional knowledge. "I've reviewed the automation documentation," said Dr. Sarah Chen, Apex Industries' chief technology officer. "The system architecture shows standard industrial control protocols, with nothing that would prevent routine restart procedures." "That's because the documentation doesn't include Project Safeguard," I said quietly. The reaction was immediate. Webb demanded explanations. Hawkins asked about security protocols. Sterling questioned whether I had created unauthorized system modifications. "Project Safeguard is a comprehensive failsafe that I built into the automation infrastructure 24 years ago," I explained. "It was designed to protect against external threats, cyber attacks, industrial espionage, hostile takeovers by foreign entities. I never documented it because documentation creates security vulnerabilities. You built a backdoor into our entire production system." Webb's voice carried the outrage of someone discovering that his house keys didn't work on his own locks. "I built protection against exactly the kind of situation we're facing now. People who don't understand the systems trying to destroy them for short-term profit." Dr. Chen pulled up system diagrams on her laptop, scrolling through thousands of lines of code while searching for evidence of my hidden protocols. "I don't see any indication of secondary control systems." "You won't," I said. "It's integrated at the firmware level with military-grade encryption. The only way to access it is through biometric confirmation and passphrase authentication that exist only in my memory." The negotiation that followed was unlike anything I had experienced in my career. Lawyers appeared via video conference to discuss liability issues. Accountants calculated delay penalties that increased by millions of dollars for each day of production shutdown. Public relations specialists worried about media coverage and investor confidence. Through it all, Tyler Blackstone sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence as the magnitude of his mistakes became clear to everyone in the room. The Wonder Boy who had promised to drag Meridian into the 21st century had instead created the most expensive operational failure in the company's history. "What do you want?" Webb finally asked. I had prepared for this moment during the sleepless hours before dawn, thinking through consequences and requirements while the snow accumulated outside my bedroom window. Tyler Blackstone's immediate termination with full documentation of the circumstances leading to his removal. Public acknowledgement that yesterday's accusations against me were false and malicious. Full reinstatement with expanded authority to prevent future hostile takeovers of operational knowledge. "That's extortion," Blackstone said, speaking for the first time in over an hour. "That's consequences," I replied. "You wanted to eliminate legacy knowledge. Now you're discovering what happens when legacy knowledge fights back." Webb and Hawkins exchanged glances that contained entire conversations about liability, public relations, and the price of corporate arrogance. The calculation was obvious: restore my position or face hundreds of millions in losses, plus federal investigation into defense contract violations. "Tyler," Webb said without looking at Blackstone, "you're terminated effective immediately for gross mismanagement resulting in operational failure and breach of fiduciary responsibility." The dismissal was clinical and absolute. Security escort, immediate revocation of access privileges, and formal investigation into potential fraud related to the Advanced Manufacturing Analytics contract. Blackstone's departure was witnessed by the same executives who had applauded his appointment 6 months earlier. Ashley Turner and Jennifer Walsh were terminated within the hour for their roles in manufacturing evidence and implementing discriminatory policies. Brandon Wells and the other McKinsey consultants were escorted from the building with instructions never to return. At 10:30 a.m., I stood in the main production control room with my laptop connected to the Project Safeguard interface. Recovery required a specific sequence of restart commands that I had never shared with anyone, executed in precise order while monitoring system responses that only I fully understood. The first production line came online at 11:15, followed by the others at carefully measured intervals to prevent power grid overload. By noon, the familiar symphony of manufacturing had resumed across all 3 buildings. Martha Rodriguez was rehired that afternoon as senior floor supervisor, with authority to rebuild the maintenance team using workers who understood machinery rather than algorithms. Thomas Brennan returned as executive consultant with full access and decision-making authority. Marcus Rodriguez was promoted to lead technician with responsibility for training new employees in the diagnostic techniques his mother had perfected. The investigation into Blackstone's corruption lasted 6 months and resulted in criminal charges for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. Advanced Manufacturing Analytics lost their government contracting eligibility and eventually filed for bankruptcy. The AI monitoring system they had installed was removed and replaced with upgraded versions of my automation protocols. 6 months after the crisis, I stood in the same conference room where my career had nearly ended, addressing a gathering of manufacturing executives from across the aerospace industry. The topic was institutional knowledge preservation and the dangers of prioritizing disruption over expertise. Legacy knowledge isn't about resistance to change. I explained to an audience that included CEOs, engineers, and policymakers who were grappling with similar challenges at their own companies. It's about understanding that innovation builds on foundation rather than replacing it. When you destroy institutional knowledge, you're not modernizing. You're gambling your company's future on the assumption that algorithms can replace human wisdom. The presentation became a Harvard Business School case study titled "The $500 Million Text Leadership Legacy and the Price of Institutional Knowledge." MIT invited me to teach a graduate seminar on automation system design. The American Society of Manufacturing Engineers awarded me their Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to industrial automation and workforce development. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Emma, now 13, had been assigned a school project about heroes in her community. She interviewed me about the crisis and its resolution, asking questions that revealed how much she had learned about standing up for principles, even when the cost might be enormous. "Mom," she said as we reviewed her final draft, "when you sent that text message, weren't you scared?" "Terrified," I admitted, "but sometimes being scared is less important than being right." "Would you do it again?" I thought about Martha Rodriguez training a new generation of technicians in her rebuilt department, Thomas Brennan consulting on strategic decisions that prioritized long-term stability over short-term profit, Marcus Rodriguez teaching apprentices to listen to machinery with the same patience his mother had shown me. "Every time," I said. "Some things are worth fighting for even when you're fighting alone." The lesson that emerged from those catastrophic months wasn't about the power of hidden failsafes or the satisfaction of defeating corporate bullies. It was about the responsibility that comes with expertise and the obligation to protect institutional knowledge against those who would destroy it for personal gain. Legacy knowledge isn't about clinging to the past. It's about building bridges between what we've learned and what we might become. It's about understanding that true leadership means nurturing wisdom rather than eliminating it. Tyler Blackstone had wanted to eliminate legacy thinking, but he discovered that legacy isn't a limitation. It's the foundation on which all genuine progress is built. And when you attack that foundation, you don't create innovation, you create collapse. Today, Meridian Manufacturing employs over 800 people across 5 facilities. Our automation systems are studied by engineers around the world as examples of sustainable innovation that respects both human expertise and technological advancement. The company that nearly collapsed under the weight of misguided disruption has become a model for how traditional knowledge and contemporary technology can work together to create something stronger than either could achieve alone. The text message that cost Tyler Blackstone his career and saved 600 jobs contained just one word, but it represented 24 years of dedication, wisdom, and the courage to protect what matters most. Sometimes legacy knowledge doesn't need to explain itself. It just needs to demonstrate its value when the moment demands it. And sometimes that demonstration changes everything. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where your experience and knowledge were dismissed by someone who thought newer was automatically better? How did you handle it when people in authority positions undervalued the wisdom that comes from years of dedicated work? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below about standing up for institutional knowledge and the importance of respecting expertise that's been earned through time and dedication. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button to support content that celebrates the value of experience and wisdom. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who fought back against injustice and won through determination and courage. And share this story with anyone who's ever felt undervalued at work or seen good people pushed out by those who mistake disruption for progress. Thank you for listening to this story about the power of legacy knowledge and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. Remember that your experience matters, your knowledge has value, and sometimes the most powerful response to those who underestimate you is simply showing them what happens when that knowledge isn't there anymore. Until next time, keep fighting for what you believe in and never let anyone convince you that wisdom is worthless just because it wasn't learned yesterday.